These books are written according to a very special law, the law of the roots and the branches, that every single word is written from spiritual attainment, that nothing there is abstract, that nothing there is just some imagination, but every single word has been attained by a Kabbalist, and that word that he attained, he wrote down in words. And these words seem to us, as we recognize them, they seem to us as words from this world, but really they're words from the spiritual world that point to their branches in this world. And the Kabbalists wrote in a code language to each other from one person who attains these words to another person who attains these words. And that's basically what we learn. So every single word in the authentic Kabbalistic writings, and if you want to make sure you're reading from the authentic writings, then make sure you stick to the materials in our library, in our bookstore, because there we make sure that everything is only authentic Kabbalah. And they're basically speaking in a code language, like Asaf is now drawing. So they're speaking about the roots. If they're talking about a house or a tree, they're not talking about a house or a tree in this world. They're talking about the spiritual root of that same item that we see in this world as a result. And then the question is a very, very powerful question. Why do we need these Kabbalistic writings? Why do we need these books if we don't yet attain what they're writing from? And today we're going to answer that question.
We are going to answer that, and to do that, let's try to dive in. We need to kind of go into a deeper understanding of this whole mechanism of roots and branches. In order to do that, there's a really good excerpt that we have from a daily lesson of Rav Lightman when he takes this whole concept of roots and branches that you already heard once, and now you'll see that he gives it a more kind of personal, intimate interpretation. He explains this from the perspective of our personal attainment. So we'll go into watching this video clip right now. 1 second, our tech guy. Yes, Adam.
The purpose of roots and branches?
We need the first clip is the language of roots and branches. Okay, the one that was recently sent. Yeah, great. So we wanted to make sure we have the right clip for you guys, and so we want you to do the following. Listen to it carefully. If you have questions that wake up as you watch, just shoot them into the question and answer chat box. Right away. Don't linger on your questions. Just send them. We definitely want to get your questions that arise as you watch this clip, and try to kind of go with that flow into that deeper perspective of the language of roots and branches. All right. So let's watch the clip and enjoy it.
A person attains many intellectual things by the study of Kabbalah, but that doesn't have anything to do with attaining the roots. The attainment of the roots is called the attainment of the qualities of bestowal. It's not knowledge. It is the attainment of corrections, of qualities, new qualities. I have now 613 corporeal desires, and when I attain them in their spiritual form, meaning that they become 613 desires of bestowal, that means that I have attained my roots. I attain myself as a giver instead of myself as a receiver. That is called my roots. The upper world is what is painted or pictured within me through my corrected qualities. Roots are my qualities. It's just like now, what I see in this world. What does it mean that I see something? I feel myself here. That picture is inside of me, the picture of this world. The collection or the inner picture, the connection that I have between my qualities is what I call this world. I have many impressions and different connections in my inner schema, and I feel all of that, and that's what I call this world. When that schema within me will work according to bestowal at the minimal level with all its items, that will be the attainment of the roots. The connection between what I had before, when I felt this world within my corporeal schema, when I was entirely connected in order to receive between my qualities, and the schema that is already connected according to the program of bestowal, the connection between those two is called the language of the branches. What does that language give me? I begin to understand how the Creator created the levels, the steps, degrees of attainment. That's what I begin to recognize. Not what's happening on a certain level, on the surface, but what's between the levels. How the descent or ascent happened between the levels. Now, why do I need to know that? If I learn just one level, then I'm either inanimate or vegetative or animate on that level. If I study the difference between those levels, then I understand how I can change myself. Meaning, a language is the means to rise every time. It doesn't explain to us this language of the branches. It doesn't explain to us what's happening on the surface, like our language does. Where I know that this is a bear, and that's a house, and this is a car, and here's a table. No. The language of the branches explains to me the difference, the gap between this world and the spiritual world. The connection between the root and the branch. That's what it explains to me. It's not that I study the spiritual world per se. I mostly study both worlds, one against the other. And then I learn the Creator's action. Because what's important here is not the level itself, but what's between the levels. And this helps me realize how I can change myself and rise higher and higher.
All right, so this video clip, it's possible that you remember it also from the end of the previous lesson. It is a very deep explanation that Rav Lightman gives on roots and branches. Why? Because essentially, if you remember this drawing, Adam, if we can, Adam, put on the drawing, we have these two levels, there we go, these two levels of roots and branches. And essentially, what Rav Lightman just said in this video clip that we saw is this, is that this, one second, this whole thing, this whole complex of roots and branches with this one-sided connection of spiritual causes creating consequences on lower levels of reality. Now he says all of this is actually where? All of this happens within the person. All of this happens within the person who attains it. And when we're talking about spiritual ascent, when we're talking about rising through degrees in spirituality and rising, climbing up the spiritual ladder, rising through spiritual worlds or levels of concealment, all of it is discussing what is happening within a person who advances into spirituality. And from that perspective, we need to look at the language of roots and branches if we are to understand the answer to the question that Gilad reminded us in the beginning of the lesson, which is, what do we do with this language if we don't understand it to begin with? How can we work with it? What does it give to us? And so, if you have any questions at this point on the topic, on the issue, just go ahead and send them, and we'll definitely use them and relate to them. And let's continue. So, to remind you,
there actually is a question now.
There is a question.
Yes,
all right, so let's go. If it's on the topic,
yeah,
let's go
on
ahead,
the topic. Yeah. It's from Katyo from Pennsylvania. So the question is, sometimes it's hard to even ask questions because the command of the language is just not there yet. Mm-hmm. However, we're constantly attaining the language of the branches because our intent is to continue to study, right?
I feel what you're saying, because what happens in the study of Kabbalah and when we go through these texts of the Kabbalists is exactly that sometimes we don't even know exactly how to formulate what we feel or what we want to ask, but it is being built within us, it's being formed within us. And yes, there's absolutely a significant influence to what we want during the study. We're going to get right into that in just a few minutes, and you'll see just how important that is. Yeah. We have more questions?
We have another one from Millie from Indianapolis. Millie is asking, is this happening within our heart?
Well, it's happening within us, inside of us. Heart is a confusing word, because physically our heart is just a pump. Obviously, when we say heart, and if we relate to the physical beating heart, it's nothing more than a physical pump. But if you're relating to the desire, when you say heart, then this is where it is. Our vessel of perception, of experience, of sensation, of perception, the place where we exist, the place where we feel and experience reality is our desire. And it's the only thing that was created. That's the vessel that was created by the Creator. And all that we feel, experience, think, and do, it all happens as the evolution of that desire. So yes, spiritual attainment happens within our vessel, within our will to receive, within our desire, yes. All right, so let's move forward. Adam, if you can put on the first quote, and we'll use that to go further. So the language of the branches, this is again from the article by Baal Sulam called The Essence of the Wisdom of Kabbalah, an article, by the way, that you should definitely go into and read in full on your own. You can find it in our Kabbalah for the Student book, which is a book that will really accompany you for I would say for your life. If you study Kabbalah in a serious way, this has really a collection of all the sources that you should have and be familiar with. So he says this: the language of branches, though extremely suitable for its task of delving into the studies of this wisdom, more than other languages, is only so if the listener is wise in his own right, meaning that he knows and understands the way the branches relate to their roots. It is because these relations are not at all clear when looking from the lower upwards. In other words, it's impossible to find any deduction or semblance in the upper roots by observing the lower branches. Right? So this takes us back to the core of, or the crux of our question. If we are here, there we go. If we are here, There is no way that we can look at all kinds of stuff in our world, right? Let's say this is a house, this is a whatever, I think it's a tree. This is like, you know, other people. This is some sort of an animal. I think so. Here's the soil, or the ground. Here's the sun that's shining. And you can put in, you know, everything that's happening in the world and Donald Trump and whatever you want, okay? But there is no chance that by looking and observing and studying any of the items and elements on the branches level that we can somehow understand what is happening here on the roots level, right? And Kabbalists, how is it that they are discussing the roots by naming the branches? Because they're familiar with this kind of connection here, right? That's what we discussed before. They attain the connection between the degrees. So when they're using different words of this world, they're actually referencing what they feel and experience in the spiritual world. They see deep into matter through this world. This world becomes like transparent, and they use it only as language, because how can you communicate something about an experience that has where words don't exist, where physical objects don't exist, where there's only feelings of qualities and principles of nature that work together, but there's no language there, and there's no elements, physical elements. So through this world, they're actually using it as a reference, as if they're standing behind, outside this world, talking to each other, and, you know, pointing at it to discuss, to converse about different things they experience from their level, right? So how does this help us? Well, if we don't have any other questions...
Yes, we do actually.
We do? Okay, so let's take your questions before we answer ours.
All right, so first of all, this is a follow-up question from before, from Pamela from New Jersey, about the explanation of the initial one before. What does one do exactly? So this is when we were talking about that the heart understands, that the heart attains it, that we're feeling this within the heart.
Yeah.
So it's a good question, Pamela. What does one do? It's very practical, because throughout the entire study, this question will reoccur. You'll study, you'll advance, and then you'll end up asking yourself, okay, so what do I do? So today in this lesson, up until now, we've learned a lot of things that you can do, right? We've learned what the wisdom of Kabbalah is, and it's how to receive. We've learned what your intention needs to change from the desire to receive in order to receive, to bestow in order to bestow. We read about the languages of roots and branches, and now the question, what does one exactly do, is exactly the topic of the lesson. What do we do with these writings? Why do we need to study these texts? So we'll leave that question open for now, and we'll refer to it throughout the entire lesson, actually. We have another question about this illustration and the clip from a student who's asking, would you give a sentence example of a language of branches and how to understand or interpret it?
Sure. When Kabbalists talk about, for instance, a body and what's happening with it, a body in Kabbalah means the desire to receive, the desire that was created. Sometimes, if they use the language of branches, they'll use this term, and if you read it incorrectly, then you might be thinking that they're talking about the body in this world. They might even say things like, we need to wash our hands, but they're actually talking about hands as in vessels of reception, and washing them meaning to purify them by undergoing a correction of the quality of bestowal and cleansing them in that respect. And all they're talking about is the internal spiritual states. We can, we can go on and on with from that to all
Genesis,
sorts of
even the opening of
exactly
Genesis.
the biblical stories. But
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So heavens, is that talking about the skies? So according to Kabbalah, no, the heavens is a quality of bestowal that's within a person, and the earth does not refer to the soil and the land, like Asaf was just illustrating now actually. The earth refers to the desire. So in the beginning, that's what was created. There was this interaction between these two desires. And like Asaf said, any of the authentic writings, they're written in a language. We actually read this last lesson. If you didn't catch the last lesson, then it's highly recommended to download it, because this is actually a direct continuation of the last lesson. And we read out some text at the beginning of the last lesson, and we saw how they can sometimes be very misleading, because sometimes they seem like they're speaking about things in this world, but really they're talking only about spiritual attainment. And in other cases, there's no room for confusion, because they're talking about the actual spiritual objects like Malchut and Bina and Keter and things that there's no way to confuse for things that are in this world.
Yeah, well, so there are several, the concept, the principle of the language of the branches is what we covered really so far. And this is what's important for us at this point to understand, that it's not talking about this world, it's using this world as a reference to talk about the spiritual world. Kabbalists can use it in order to communicate about their spiritual attainments and basically enrich and develop the wisdom of Kabbalah that way. Now, there's a development of the language of the branches itself, which we will touch upon later in this lesson, I hope, where you'll understand more about the differences between why they sometimes use words that are actually seem like objects in this world, and other times, or even stories. Other times it's a more technical language. We'll understand the differences in the developmental stages of the language of the branches as well. And then it'll make things clearer. But here's our situation. If you see, Gilad, any question you think is, on the topic, and so let's we can definitely integrate that too.
The students are delving deeper into it.
All right, so definitely we can go. We can go with your questions, guys. Sure.
Okay, so all in this world. This is a question from Joanna from Finland. So everything in this world is a kind of feeling from the spiritual world, from the roots?
Great, Joanna. Excellent observation, because if you went deep into what Rav Lightman explained in the clip that we played, it's exactly that. There is no roots and branches, and they're like different realities. They're levels of concealment and revelation of the same one reality. There's only one reality we exist in. We are right now in the spiritual world, in the world of Ein Sof, meaning the highest degree of spiritual attainment, the world of infinity, where everything is revealed, everything exists. We are in an ocean of something called the Creator, or in a more scientific expression of the Kabbalists, the quality of bestowal and unconditional love that fulfills all of nature, permeates all the elements that and connecting them, and fulfills us, and it's all around us right now. What's the problem? The problem is we just don't feel it. Why don't we feel it? That will actually, thank you, Joanna, will help us go further. The reason we don't feel it is because we don't feel it. What do I mean by that? If you think about it, there's a wealth of music playing right now around you. There's wavelengths that carry music. Some of it you like, some of it you don't like. And it's all around you right now. But you can't hear it, can you? Why not? Because to hear it, you have to turn on a radio receiver and tune it to a certain frequency, and then it captures the waves that are traveling in the air. And when it captures them by creating the similar frequencies in itself, inside itself, then there's an equivalence of form that is created, and so you can hear the music, you can hear the sound. Think of that, you know, of this mobile device that's in your pocket that connects you to, let's say, the database of knowledge of the whole of humanity. And if you have that device and you tune in, then you can connect to the data, to the collective knowledge of humanity we call the internet. And if you don't have it, it's still there, but you just don't have the device to connect to it. Spirituality works in the exact same way. It's not that there is some world that we need to go to or some place that we need to visit and move from here to there. It's a change that we need to do within us, making us more sensitive, more perceptive to a certain frequency that Kabbalists refer to as the quality of bestowal. And they explain that when we learn how to develop that inner sensitivity, then this is called spiritual attainment. And it's as tangible and concrete as holding this pen in my hand. Nothing theoretical, airy-fairy, fluffy, or anything that is similar to, you know, a belief that we have. No, it is a sharp perception of reality. And in fact, what they discover through that process of spiritual attainment is that it's an extension of our world. Now think of roots and branches from this perspective. Through this world, you continue to live in it. You continue to experience and perceive everything that you do perceive already, but you begin to see more connections. You begin to see a more causal level of reality that makes this lower level seem actually like a lower level of experience. You delve into the code lines of the program that creates these situations you experience here. It's like the difference between seeing the frames in a film and reading the entire script and knowing where it goes. It's a difference from being an actor, so to speak, in the scene, not even knowing that you're acting, and being in the film director's seat. So this is the kind of perception that is developed in spirituality, and this is a very good kind of prism through which to understand roots and branches. And so how does it help us that Kabbalists who, let's draw this again in a kind of a new way. So if we, there we go, I think that's the pen I need, great. So if we're here, right, we're in this world. Kabbalists give us a book. I'm going to deliberately put it here. There we go. Kabbalists give us a book. And the book, or the Kabbalistic texts, they talk about all kinds of things. Let's say these are not introductory articles, but actual texts, like if you remember, Gilad gave us examples of such texts in the beginning of the previous lesson. And we saw that it's a language that some of it we think we understand, some of it we understand that we don't understand. In any case, it is not language that we can simply interpret. This is actually what's good about the language of Kabbalah, because it's a complete development of the language of the branches that doesn't mislead us. We'll get deeper into that later. But in any case, we are here reading a certain book, but the book is actually talking about what's happening here in spirituality. This is the spiritual level, and we are here in the physical level or the corporeal level, right? So how does it help us if the book is talking about a level of reality that we still don't perceive? Sure, for Kabbalists, they understand the connection, so for them it's great, it's helpful, right? That's our question. And we're going to answer it with a quote from Baal HaSulam that we're going to interpret. Before that, do we have more questions that we should, you think, already
Let's
get
continue
into?
the quote, and then we'll.
All right,
keep
so we'll move on
going with
to a quote from Baal HaSulam that answers this question finally. So, Baal HaSulam says this, and by the way, this is coming from a different article. This is coming from the Introduction to the Study of the 10 Sfirot. Actually, Adam, you can go back to my face for a second. No, there we go. Yeah, hello. So, Baal HaSulam, Kabbalist Yehuda Ashlag, he wrote an interpretation, a commentary on the Ari's book, The Tree of Life. And we're talking about about 2,000 pages, I think, where if you read it, you will clearly, very soon, very, very fast, understand that you don't understand. Some of it will even sound like gibberish, and at first, and he details the entire structure of the spiritual ladder. It's a commentary on the Ari's book, The Tree of Life, as I said. And then he writes, after he writes that really unbelievable composition, he writes an essay called The Introduction to that, The Introduction to the Study of the 10 Sfirot. And at the end of the introduction, he writes this quote that is seminal in the wisdom of Kabbalah, a quote that really is summarizes nothing less than the purpose of studying Kabbalah. The whole reason for dealing with the texts and engaging with the Kabbalistic sources when we just begin and we don't yet have an attainment of them. Right? So I want you to get into this text with this kind of preparation. This is what is very, very important for him to tell the reader who's going to go into the studying of the spiritual world, the study of the spiritual world and the structure of spirituality. So let's see what he writes. So he writes this: why did the Kabbalists obligate each person to study the wisdom of Kabbalah? Right? In many articles of Baal HaSulam himself and other Kabbalists throughout history, they say that studying Kabbalah is necessary for a person's development. They're saying that in one way or another it will become necessary for all people to evolve and so on. They put so much emphasis on that, and yet we just said throughout an entire lesson, in the previous lesson, that they're talking in a language, when we're talking about the actual Kabbalistic texts, they're talking in a language that we don't understand. So how can they say we have to study that wisdom? And he says, indeed, there's a great thing in it worthy of being publicized. There is a wonderful, invaluable remedy to those who engage in the wisdom of Kabbalah. And check this out. Although they do not understand what they're learning, through the yearning and the great desire to understand what they're learning, they awaken upon themselves the lights that surround their souls. Let's read the end of this once more. Although, follow with your eyes on the text and try to get your mind and heart around this. Although they don't understand what they're learning, through the yearning and the great desire to understand what they're learning, they awaken upon themselves the lights that surround their souls. Back to the drawing. Here's what he's saying. He's saying that when we look at these texts, right? With our physical eyes, we look at these texts. We don't understand what they're actually talking about. And we don't need to. It's not about intellectualizing the texts and making sense of it when it's actually talking about something we haven't yet experienced. But, he says, if we look at these texts not just with our physical eye and trying to interpret it in our physical brains, but if we activate our desire, and I'm going to draw this symbol here, which you should already be familiar with. If we activate that, this yearning to not just understand what's being written, but to actually be there, although they don't understand, but through the great yearning to know what it's talking about, meaning to be here, which is to attain the true interpretation of what's written in those texts, even though my brain, physical brain, and my current perception doesn't capture it. Then he says, what happens is, something that we need to explain, they awaken something called surrounding light that influences them and builds their soul, meaning builds their vessel of perceiving spirituality. And that influence is something called light, surrounding light, or the light that reforms, it's also called. So what exactly is happening here? Is this some sort of hocus pocus type of thing? That at the end of the day, after Kabbalah gives us some explanations about how this world works and how we work within it, and you know what is the purpose of creation and what is the quality of the Creator, and all of that stuff that we can sort of understand. In order to actually attain those levels of spiritual attainment, what we need to do is draw some light, attract some mystical kind of force that will suddenly magically take us to spirituality. Is that what he's talking about? What do you guys think? How does that sound to you? If you have suggestions or further questions, go for them. Let's see what we have so far.
Maybe you want to continue reading the passage? I think it'll give.
That's the we just read that.
All right.
That
so
quote. Yeah, we can stop it there.
All right. So we have a few questions here. Before we get to them, I just want to reiterate one point, just to make sure that it's clear what you got here. Because when a ninja goes through their training, at the end of their training, they get their samurai sword or something like that, right? So you have just been given the Kabbalistic samurai sword. That's what you've got in your hands now. Probably the most powerful tool that you will get throughout your study, the most practical tool. And a lot of your questions here were about what can you do, and this is the answer to what you can do. And I can't even begin to describe the power of this concept of drawing the light, because this is a game changer in terms of your spiritual path. Because it means that no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, you can always, with just flipping out your iPhone or your Android or the Shamati booklet that you might have, and if you don't, then you should get one, because it's no longer just a book. This now becomes your connection to the spiritual world. By simply opening up this text, by taking a look at it, but not just physically, because you can learn all of the text off by heart and that won't lead you to spirituality even in 100 years. No, that's not the action here that Asaf was explaining, that Baal Sulam talks about. The action is while you're looking at the book, while you're reading the text, and not understanding even a single word. You could read it, it might sound, it can be even Hebrew, you know what? It can be, you might be reading the Zohar in Hebrew. If you have the intention for this text to work on you, if you have the intention that it will raise you to where it's written from, if you have the intention that from reading it will come this light that will lift you and correct you, then that is the most powerful and practical spiritual action that you can do. So take a few seconds, breathe in, and understand what you've just been given. So related to the questions, this already, I hope, answers some of the questions, including yours, Pamela, from before. What does one do exactly? That is what one does. One works with the intention. And Yvette from Maryland asks a similar question. What is one specific physical thing that I can do now to change or improve the roots? And she adds, not including the Rav book and group. Well, actually, there is no physical action that you can do to improve any connection to the roots or to change anything in this world, because any physical action that you do is only on this level of this world. So you can, like I said before, you can study all the Kabbalistic texts off by heart. That will not move you even an inch forward. The only thing that will is your intention. So what is the one specific thing that you can do, not physical, but thing that you can do, is activate that intention. How can you activate that intention? Yes, there are physical actions that can help you do that. For example, opening the book. For example, having a Rav who guides you to the right intention. For example, having the group. So these things are no longer just, I hope, concepts that you're trying to find another solution for. These become tools to activate your sword, to turn on the switch that can make your sword work. So these things are like aids to activate this tool called the light that reforms. And we have also a question from Calgary, from Marcel, which I hope has already been answered. How can we create these waves to reveal this? So that's exactly how we can do it. Now we have, do you want to add?
Let's
keep going with questions.
We can either continue or continue with questions. Maybe you can look at some of the questions, see what you think is more kind of pressing and relevant.
Right.
And in the meantime, we'll continue a little bit. So to continue, Gilad, exactly, how does this thing then works? Right?
So just about that already, Yvette is asking a question. Mm-hmm. She's asking, do we just read the books and imagine that we're in the spiritual world?
Great. So Yvette, here's Yvette and everyone else. Here's how it works. Kabbalah is not mysticism. It is people who uncovered laws of nature, just like scientists, but the tools that they use to uncover more laws than the ones that we are familiar with are simply more refined vessels of perception, more refined sensations within themselves. And so what they explain to us are laws of nature. Remember that. At all times, when you hear a Kabbalah lesson, when you read the text and something's unclear, remember that they're describing nothing else than the laws of reality. Nothing else. And so, what is that law of nature that is called the surrounding light? How does that thing works? It does sound like it's this, what, I just go into this book like Yvette is asking, and then what, I just imagine something and it works? Well, not exactly. Here's what happens. When you, if we can look at the drawing, actually, it will help give context, yeah. So when you look at this book or read the Kabbalistic texts, if you aim for anything that has to do with this world, then you're missing the point. It's not going to work on you. That could be if you are imagining that what it's talking about are things in this world, and you forget that it's written in a code language, in the language of the branches, and actually describing spiritual roots. And if you're focused on all kinds of goals in this world, when you're approaching the texts, then you're not working with the actual device that's given to you. What is happening is this. Kabbalists have written about what in the book? They've written about spirituality. What is spirituality? Spirituality is this: varying degrees of the quality of bestowal. 125 of them. There's nothing else in spirituality. It's a deeper and broader and greater discovery of the force that runs the whole of reality, connecting all the elements all living things, still vegetative, animate, human, all levels of nature. It is the overarching, all-inclusive law of nature. And they're getting more and more in equivalence or form with it. It's called in Kabbalah in adhesion with it, or in equivalence of form with that frequency, with that force, with that quality. And they're trying to encode that experience of spirituality, of the quality of bestowal, and how it manifests throughout the whole of reality and the entire spiritual experience. They're trying to encode that in the language of the branches. If you desire that, if you prepare yourself and you want to see that through the texts, then what happens is that you are using the text as an elevator. You're not trying to intellectualize it and understand it on your level. Rather, you're trying to identify and to desire the degree from which it was written, the degree of the author, where they are from when they're writing it. And what happens here is that there's actually two levels of the study that are happening all the time. And by the way, I'll tell you a secret. It's happening right now too. Even when we are not technically reading the text, but when we are studying the wisdom of Kabbalah, of course, the most powerful time to do that is when you're actually engaged with these source material. But you're working on preparing that desire all the time. And what's happening when you study Kabbalah is always the following dynamic. There are two levels on which you study. There is sort of the what level, which is what we're talking about, meaning the texts could be talking about this level or that level, or this principle or that principle in terms of spirituality and how our world works and so on. And sometimes you feel like you understand. You already experienced that from the lessons we had so far. You probably have experienced that already. Sometimes you feel you understand, right? Let's draw this as a peak. Sometimes you don't understand at all. Sometimes it's you kind of get what's happening, then you have another peak, then you have another decline, and there's a certain right graph that could describe your ups and downs in terms of the what level, understanding and feeling what we're talking about. But what we've just described in terms of how to activate that surrounding light, that how to use the book, how to use the study as an elevator to spirituality, that requires a different level. And that level is something that you don't experience when you study in university or any other intellectual kind of knowledge that you study. That level is the why level. In other words, what do I want to get out of this study? Do I want to get smarter? Do I want to, enrich my knowledge? Do I actually want this study to help me in all kinds of things in this world? Maybe I'm actually, focused on having success right now in business or in my career or in some other aspect of this corporeal life. That is the why level. Maybe I prepared myself correctly for the study, and I have learned gradually how to focus on my point in the heart when I approach the study. Meaning that one desire out of all the other desires, I single it out and I focus on that, and that is the desire that has brought me to the study of Kabbalah to begin with. That desire that brought up the questions in me about what is the meaning of being here and existing? What is the purpose of living? What is the source of reality? Is there a source? Can I get in touch with it? When I focus on that point in the heart, that, and I work on it on two levels: intensifying that desire, making it very important to me, and also making it more qualitative, trying to refine exactly what it is that I'm aiming for. Spirituality, what's spirituality? Discovering the Creator. What is the Creator? The quality of bestowal. What is that quality? A quality that puts me beyond my own limited, narrow interests, beyond my egoism. A quality that is of unconditional love. How can that be? How can that feel like? What does that mean? If I focus on that level when I engage with the Kabbalistic material, then that would mean that I'm at a peak on the Y level. And here's the interesting thing. You could go through you definitely go through ups and downs in that too, and it's part of the process. It's a natural development. But these levels don't necessarily align. That's the interesting thing. Meaning that sometimes I could be thinking that I'm getting the material and it even feels great and I understand what's being said, but maybe my desire for actually attaining spirituality at that moment is kind of not there at all. I'm satisfied and it's all great, it's all good, and I'm actually here right now. So these levels, these sort of dynamics don't necessarily coincide. And what's important they might, it all depends on whether you're prepared and you're to focus on your spiritual desire, that little point in the heart that needs to grow. That's the only thing. In reality, if you want to take one lesson, a learned lesson that summarizes everything you need to know about your first course in Kabbalah, it's focus on the point in the heart. That's the only thing that matters. Grow that desire. That will bring everything else. That will make you smarter even. That will give everything that you need for your spiritual progress. If you just focus on how do I grow that desire, how do I make it important, how do I make that an important goal in my life, what do I need for that, then you'll start seeing that in order to come to the lesson and to the texts with this sharp focus, you actually need to prepare yourself. You need some sort of a supportive environment. We'll get to that gradually, but this is really the important level in terms of studying Kabbalah. That's also called working on your intention, or the inner work in Kabbalah. I hope you now are beginning to see how these things that you've heard throughout the course so far are kind of coming together. So, back to the other drawing. When we focus on that, what we're doing, if you go back to the radio receiver example or your mobile phone that captures, that can plug into the internet. So they have, the Kabbalists that is, encoded into the book their spiritual experiences. If I try to use the texts to unlock what's in it, and it's not in my brain, because my brain can only understand my current level of perception. My desire needs to grow in order to, my desire for spirituality, my point in the heart needs to grow, right? As we just explained, in order to attain what they're talking about. So if I focus on that, then the book begins to be this device for spiritual transformation. And when I yearn for these higher states, look what happens now. And I'll explain it on two levels. When I yearn for higher states, I resemble a child that really, really wants to be something that grown-ups are, like children who, play with being on an airplane. When they play they're in it. They're totally in it. They don't make calculations right now. They don't care that they're actually playing with toys and so forth. They put themselves in that situation of being as a pilots or, on the airplane, being in the clouds, even though they've never been there. And their depiction of that is childish. This is exactly how we evolve in spirituality as well. We hear about the Creator, we hear about this all-inclusive force. First, we think about it as, maybe something that is more human-like. Gradually, our desire is more and more refined, and we understand that we're talking about the all-inclusive force of nature. And gradually, we begin to get more and more and more qualitative about how we define the Creator. And so, here's another point. Remember that in previous lessons, and I'm trying to bring that together now. Remember, okay, I'll just use another color and stay in the same drawing. Remember that in other lessons, we spoke about something called the collective soul that we're all part of. We said that while we, in this world, feel ourselves like this, like individuals, because, we're separated in our bodies, we're 7 billion protein-based bodies. That's how it feels like, that's how it seems like, that's reality, right? And Kabbalists say no. In truth, we're all connected. Our desires are connected beyond our bodies. Our bodies is just a concealment over the it's a concealment that creates an illusion of time and space and motions and all kinds of limitations that don't allow us to see the actual picture. And the actual picture is that we're all pieces of one collective desire, also called the collective soul, and we're interconnected. And guess what? That quality of bestowal that we keep talking about, that Creator that Kabbalists continuously define as the quality of love, the quality of bestowal, it's what exists in the connections between all these pieces here. And so, if you really want to use the Kabbalistic texts to use them as a spiritual device, as a device of transformation, then what you need to be working on within yourself is that depiction. It's what does it mean to be connected with others and with the rest of reality, beginning with those other points in the hearts who also yearn for the same goal. That is really the concept of the group in Kabbalah. That is really what people who study Kabbalah together are aiming to do. And that frequency, that resonance that they begin to experience happens between them. And I'm throwing these things at you just to kind of give you, because I'm seeing from some of the questions about Rav group and books, at the beginning we think about these things in a very physical way. And it takes a while, but then we begin to understand that they're being discovered within our attainment, within our experience, in our inner process of development. One last point, and it's this. Let's go back to the text for a second. Right, so, why did the Kabbalists obligate each person to study the wisdom of Kabbalah? Indeed, there's a great thing in it worthy of being publicized. There is a wonderful, invaluable remedy. That's what I wanted to focus on as a last point. Why do Kabbalists call this surrounding light a remedy? In Hebrew, the word is actually sgula. It means merit. Meaning there's a certain kind of quality to it that it happens whether we understand that entire process I just described or not. Meaning, we can actually, exactly, go back to the drawing. what is the quality of a remedy? You know, let's say when you go to the doctor and you take a certain pill and it influences certain chemicals or biochemicals in your brain and your body and so forth. You don't have to understand the compound and know chemistry and know exactly physiologically what happens in your body in order for it to work. You just need to take the pill. This is the beauty of it. This is what Gilad was talking about earlier, that if you begin to understand what you have in your hands, and the only thing you need to focus on, then you begin to use it, and from the usage of it, you begin to make more discernments. You don't need to intellectualize it or even, remember everything that we've just explained about it. You just need to work on using it, to practice it, to be that child that wants to grow, to be a pilot, or in other words, to desire spiritual attainment. Another example for that is, if you take a caveman, and you show a caveman the concept of a light bulb, and there's a switch on the wall that you hit, and then it turns on the light bulb. For a caveman who doesn't understand that these things are connected, that when you hit the switch, it closes the electrical circuit that's connected to the light bulb, and electricity flows, and then it manifests in that light, using the electricity in the light bulb. He doesn't get it. For us, it's common knowledge. We grow into that world, so it becomes something we don't even, doubt or question. We just know that it works, right? And this is the beautiful thing with the Kabbalistic texts and this concept of this illumination that works through these encoded texts, spiritually encoded texts. What happens is when we desire to be in that, according to our degree, it doesn't matter if we exactly understand what spirituality is, when we work on the desire, when we hit the switch, in other words, work with our points in the hearts, we're hitting the switch. Even if we're like the caveman and we don't see the connection and exactly how it works, if we're hitting the switch, the light is going to turn on. And that is really the unbelievably important, worthy of being publicized, as Baal HaSulam says, remedy that exists in the wisdom of Kabbalah. Sorry for making it a bit too long.
Right, so basically, if you want to summarize this whole thing, let's say you're saying, wow, this was complicated things, the collective soul and everything, right? What do we do? It's very, very simple. Like Asaf said, you just need to remember that you need to press the button. And what's pressing the button? Pressing the button is reading the Kabbalistic text with the correct intention. So if you want to heat up your meal, you don't need to learn engineering to build a microwave, right? You can just open it up, put your food in, close it,
use the microwave.
The button. Just press the button. And that's the beauty about this concept called the reforming light, the light. Because you can use it without even understanding how exactly the mechanism works. You can use it without attaining it already. You can use it already now simply by having the intention of wanting to use it, wanting it to lift you up to where it comes from. So, a few questions. So we have a question from Andres from Guatemala, and from Aria from Miami. They're asking, we mentioned the Rav, the group, the books.
Right.
And right now we've spoken about the books. And they're asking about the group. Do I need to advance with the group, or can I do it by myself? How can we start to connect as a group? All the students listening now. So that's a great question from Andres and from Aria. And you're already asking about what is very, very relevant, because these are the concepts that are the core foundations. However, you don't need to worry, because the course is taking you hand by hand through your spiritual development. This is why it's called the fundamentals. So at this point, we've opened up the samurai sword of the Kabbalists, as I called it before. This is a very, very powerful tool, and that's reading the book with the intention of the light, even if you don't understand it, just pressing the button, right? Then the question is, how do you keep that intention? And this also connects to a question from Bora from Melbourne, who says how to build the willpower and habits to reading on a regular basis. Do we randomly just select any text or something from a previous lesson? How do we do it daily or once more? So really, where will you get the willpower and the strength to continue this? You know, because now you're awakened, you're motivated, you feel like you can't even rest, you can't even sleep. Maybe some of you have that feeling, you know, you're in the lesson and you're all energetic, and that's good. But is that going to continue? Maybe, maybe not. But in the wisdom of Kabbalah, you want to build yourself the right setup so that it will be sustainable, that it will work in the long run. Because you don't want to just come in, get excited and leave and drop it, right? That's what people do in this world in many things. And the group and the Rav, which are two concepts which we haven't exactly opened up yet, they're very, very powerful tools that can help you maintain and keep on this activity so you can actually reach that point that you want to reach. So we're not going to open up that exactly, but yes, do you need a group to advance? You do. Do you need to worry about that now exactly? No, you don't need to worry. Stick with us, and you're guaranteed to learn about the group when you need to learn it.
Maybe, just maybe. What do you think, Gilad? Maybe our guys are ready to hear a little secret. I don't know if it's the right time already, but maybe.
All right, let's.
All right.
You know.
No, because the questions seem seriously. The questions are from the questions. It seems like some students here are very feeling it and serious about it. I just wanted to add this. Look, the reality is that whether you are aware of it or not, you're already in a certain group. Right now, there are points in the hearts. You, right now, seeing all those other names that you're not familiar with in the chat, you share the same desire. The point in the heart has awakened in you, and this is something that already, to an extent, unifies you, sort of isolates you from other people in this world who are focused on other goals. And right now you have a certain goal that you're focused on, and you're sharing that goal, and that creates a certain field of connection between you. That is what the group is. Maybe, like Gilad said, later on, those who will really want to get more and more serious about this.
Those who actually want to attain spirituality.
Exactly. Will understand how to strengthen that environment called a group. But you got to understand, there's all kinds of concepts and notions about spirituality. People think about isolating themselves in the mountains, or attaining spirituality through some internal, personal, intimate kind of level of meditation or something. Look, Kabbalists explain this very simply. There's a reason why there are other people in the world and other living creatures, and the reality is built the way it is. Spirituality is discovering the connecting element across all the connecting principle across all the elements of nature, all the elements of reality. And this force of unity, this power of connection, this quality of connection, that's the quality of bestowal. The glue, the adhesive that binds all reality together and sustains it and guides it and gives it life, that's called the Creator. You cannot attain it if you don't focus yourselves on discovering it in connection with the rest of reality. So that concept of a group in Kabbalah is like a laboratory where people who have that desire and have already matured in that desire to understand that spirituality is not just some, just some sort of a personal elevation, rather they understand that it's about this, about finding this, connecting to the connecting force, so to speak. And they create this laboratory, this environment between themselves where they can create this resonance, where they know that they all work on connecting their points in the hearts. That is really what a group is in Kabbalah, and that is very, very practical. For all of you people who are asking, but what is the practical thing that I can do? What is exactly the, some of the questions were along these lines.
And these questions, by the way, it's good that you have these questions, because these questions, they represent a desire. So when you have this, what should I do? How do I advance? Am I doing it right? That's good. If you're calm, and that's what Asaf said before, with the what and the why, if you're calm and you feel completely satisfied and you're, I'm nailing this, I'm on top of it, then you should maybe be a bit concerned what's happening with your desire. So you should think about that. Is it better to be in a state that you're all fulfilled, you're satiated with the material, and you know everything? Or is it better to be in this deficiency of what do I do next? How do I do it? What do I read? Where do I read? What state is better for spiritual development?
Yeah, a simple key to measure to monitor your progress in spirituality after a lesson or at any point in time is to ask yourself, do I want it more right now than before? If the answer is yes, I feel my desire is now burning, there has been a certain step of progress. And you'll see, no, sometimes you go down, it's a part of the process as well.
Look, Marcel wants another secret, and that's already another secret that we promise we'll get to, not in this lesson, but in 2 or 3 lessons from now. What happens if the answer is no? Does that mean that you didn't do the right work? Or maybe you've done very good work?
We're not ripe for that secret yet.
And now you've been given this scale that you can now, again, balance out. But we're not going to give that secret up today. So Marcel, stick with us for more secrets. But we do have a question, a very good question from Pater from Colombia.
But Marcel but what you ask is very, very, very impressive. This will take us into the work, something called the middle line in Kabbalah, the work of 3 lines. We'll discuss this later in the course. Yeah.
So Pater from Colombia is asking, even if we focus on developing the point in the heart, it's because we want to benefit from doing so, right? It's egoistic. So will the remedy work for that case as well?
Beautiful question.
So yeah, it's a good question, Pardo.
And the answer is yes. Very simple. It's very, very good that you realize that you recognize that you're still locked in self-interest. And you know what? A Kabbalist actually discovers that even on spiritual degrees up the ladder, you always discover that in relation to the previous degree, the higher degree is always more bestowal. And you realize that in relation to where you are now, think about this. When you just started studying Kabbalah, even just a couple weeks ago, or maybe you guys, before you registered for this course, you even watched some of the material, think about the understanding that you have now and the understanding of Kabbalah and what it's about that you had, at lesson 0. There's still, even though it's a short time, I think you can already identify within you some sort of a process that in a sense makes it feel like, you've moved from interpreting Kabbalah and what it talks about on one level to another level. And that's always happening. The light that reforms does that work. We don't need to worry about the fact that our intention is not yet corrected. Work with what you have. You have a point in the heart, sure, it's still locked within the general program of the ego and self-interest. That's fine. You don't need to fix that. The light will fix that. Our part of the work is just to grow that desire. The actual correction of the intention from receiving to bestowing, from in order to receive to in order to bestow, that happens by the completion of the cycle. That happens by the influence of the surrounding light. Yeah.
I just want to add to that a quick illustration because your question is spot on. And you're asking basically, oh, that's not what I wanted. Is that it?
Adam, can you put the drawing on?
How do I get back to my pen? Oh, here we go. Okay. So basically, like Asaf said, there are 125 degrees, right? And these degrees are steps in spirituality. So imagine 125 degrees. Now, these degrees are levels of concealment and revelation. Now, what does that mean? That means that every time a person discovers a higher level of desire that is now ready to be corrected. So what are these steps really? They're ego that are being corrected to bestowal. Meaning with the intention. So your question is the very foundation of spiritual advancement, because we have no other matter to advance with other than the ego. So it's a bit confusing because in the beginning students say, no, but I want to study for my ego, so I won't study, or I want to come to the lesson because I feel good, so maybe it's better if I don't come, maybe that's more Kabbalistic. Absolutely wrong. Your ego is your only fuel to advance, because what we are is a will to receive and nothing else, and that ego can be used as a crane, meaning the ego is the step which you rise above every time to rise to another degree. And what happens when you do rise to another degree? Then you've corrected that ego that you've risen to, and then a higher level of your desire opens up, a higher level of the ego. And how do you advance to it? Again, you use the ego as a motivating force, you know? So if you, for example, let's say you don't really feel like coming to the lesson today, you're a bit tired. So what is a way that you can maybe awaken yourself? You should say, but I'm going to miss out. The class is going to advance and I'm going to fall behind. Are these egoistic calculations? Absolutely. Are they good for spirituality? Absolutely, because they're pushing you to rise. They're lifting you above the ego. So there is no other fuel, and that's important to remember, that there is no other motivating force other than the ego. Now, what's our work with the group that we already touched that secret? It's to constantly create this balance. So as long as you're working with two forces, you'll constantly be in balance. Now, we're not going to open that up any more than what I just said, but you should know that the group is already touching upon, like Asaf said, the middle line, freedom of choice. Where is it? If we're only working out of the ego, then where is our freedom of choice? It's there, because you'll see that however much you use your ego, you'll suddenly find that there is some resistance. And this connects to a question from Leslie and Mark from Whitman, Arizona, I think. The ego rebels against this. Is that normal? Are ups and downs, ups and then big downs? Absolutely. The ego rebels against it because the ego is going to be changed. Now, it's going to be changed. It's like, think of a cancerous cell. Does your body have any sorrow of curing a cancerous cell? Of course not, because the body in whole is going to be healthy. It's the same with the ego. The ego is like resisting it because the ego is like the cancerous cell. It knows it's going to die. But the desire in general has pure benefit out of this, because it will finally be able to receive in a way that the pleasure will not be cancelled like it is in this world. So maybe we'll do a lightning round of questions.
You think we can?
Yeah, I think we can.
Also have, keep in mind, we have a 4-minute clip that I think is worthwhile watching. We can also put it right at the end, but we have to make a choice.
All right, so let's at least take 3 minutes of lightning round questions.
And we also have probably like a minute of announcements.
Right, even less. Let's give it a 2-minute lightning round. All right, you ready?
All right, a blitz.
A blitz.
Let's try it.
Okay, so start from the top. Leslie and Mark again. By text, do you mean books just like the Zohar, or can we grow from books like the student books, like Wondrous Wisdom?
Any book at the moment that you can read and you can relate to, go for it. Yes, absolutely. Eventually, the source texts are ones that carry the most impactful influence of the light that reforms.
Okay. Sometimes it seems like Pardo from Colombia. Sometimes it seems like you're speaking from your own attainment. I think he's referring to us. And other times it seems like you're reciting something. Am I projecting my own ego upon you? Pardo, yes, you are. Because everything around you is already corrected. And that's a general approach. But specifically, the approach to the teacher, and that's where kind of an intermediate level, eventually our teacher is Rav Michael Leitman. The approach to the teacher is that he's on a higher degree, and a higher degree is always a corrected degree in comparison to me. So if you see anything other than that, then of course that's a projection of your ego. a question from Carol from Pennsylvania. Is there a dictionary of the languages of the book? Sorry. Is there a dictionary of the language of the books? My desire is burning badly.
The last part of your question, which is the comment, is the important one. About languages and so forth. Maybe we'll discuss this a little bit more in the next lesson if you really want to remind us.
There is a dictionary. It's inside of you, and it will be opened up the second you reach the first level of spiritual attainment. That's the opening of the dictionary.
Okay. You will gradually learn some sort of vocabulary just to kind of have more orientation. But at the end, it's what Gilad said. Yeah.
So, question from Mirna, I think, I'm not sure if I pronounced it correctly, from California. Is egoism what refuses us to connect to a serial killer, a pedophile, a rapist, or other people that we judge unacceptable or evil? The ego is what drives everything, every single action you do, and that's why there is no freedom of choice in this world. That's why the only place of freedom of choice can be when you add another force to it, which is the point in the heart. That's the beginning of true freedom. We'll get to that in the next lesson.
But the ego both keeps you out of danger, and on the other hand, it throws you into dangers. It just depends on what your ego is, interested in at a certain point in time. It moves you and dictates everything you do.
Carol is asking, are there 613 terms in the Kabbalah language, one for each desire's correction? Because I guess Carol is referring to 613 desires that need to be corrected.
Quickly, 613, like other numbers in Kabbalah, are not necessarily numerical numbers. They're terms that represent qualities. They're concepts in spirituality. There's a certain way to number 613, but it's not in the way that we think it is. Like, here's one desire for ice cream and another one for, hearing music or something like that. It doesn't work in that way. But so when you hear 613, just know that it refers to the entire desire, the sum of all desires of the soul.
All right, so that was the final question. Just a small note to Jeremy, who tuned in late, who has a new daughter. So congratulations, Jeremy.
Congratulations.
And thanks for joining us. And just before I read the announcement,
we can learn a lot from our children. Just as an aside.
Right. Just
about spirituality, if we study Kabbalah.
So actually, I wanted to just to mention, we spoke about the pay what you want tuition model, and I just wanted we wanted to thank you because it was great, and over 100 students participated in this campaign, and altogether it was very successful, and now everyone who participated helped make this available to people who can't necessarily afford it. So we really, really appreciate your contribution, and thank you for it. So what else do we have? The next lesson.
Right. Sunday, that's important because after Sunday, there's going to be a break because we have an amazing event that is happening, which is the World Kabbalah Convention with a few thousand people who are coming from about 60 countries. Probably got about 8,000 people.
And actually, I think I saw someone in the chat, right, they're also going to be there. So,
really?
So we'll see you there.
We'll see you there.
Can't remember who it was, but we'll see you there.
And for those of you who, for whatever reason, can't come to Israel, it's not a simple thing probably for a lot of you, there is an amazing opportunity coming up on May. There's going to be the North American Convention, Kabbalah Convention, that we also have once a year. So stay tuned for details on that. But in any case, make sure you understand.
You can get details on both of them on Kabbalah.info. Right now, you won't find info on the May Congress. You'll get that info in about a month and a half. You'll find the info on the Tel Aviv Exhibition Gardens February Congress, February 21 to 23rd. So because of that convention, most of our staff are going to be here in Israel with us. Yes.
So that's important to remember, that classes will resume on
March 1st.
March 1st. That's Wednesday.
Right. But there is going to be a lesson on Sunday. So the upcoming Sunday, you are going to have a lesson at 8 p.m., February 12th. And after that, the next lesson is March 1st. So again,
Yeah, which I think March
Sunday,
1st,
you have a lesson. Next lesson, March 1st.
March 1st specifically, I think it's where the EC goes back in action, and
Right, so that
your
means
lesson
your lesson would be,
should be
on the
3rd.
second.
Second, right.
2nd of March.
You'll get an email certainly about this. In any case, just be aware that after the next Sunday, it's just a break. It's nothing dramatic is supposed to happen. It's just a break for the convention.
Right. So just to conclude, we hope you take your samurai sword with you throughout the week. Use it at any chance you can. Take out a book, open the text, read it, make the intention, even do it during the day. You'll see it really changes everything. So we're really happy to be here.
Yeah, and we're signing off and leaving you with a clip from Rav Leitman about the purpose of studying Kabbalah in relation to what we discussed this lesson. So enjoy it. We'll see you next lesson. And we'll see apparently one of you or two of you, some of you in Israel even. So until then, bye-bye and all the best.
Our entire study, not only the Book of Zohar, but Talmud Asar Sfirot, essays, articles, all the introductions, all our text material. If we study it in order to simply understand it intellectually, then we just don't attain the goal. Meaning, it seems like Baal HaSulam writes that out of the great yearning to understand what you learn, you draw the light that reforms. But we are misinterpreting the word to understand or to know, because in Kabbalah, to know means to bond, to connect. As the verse, Adam knew Eve. It's a concept of knowing, which means zivug, which is coupling, connection. So if a person wants to make that connection with the spiritual world, to enter the spiritual world, to live in the spiritual world, to experience it, reveal it, feel it, it can only happen according to the law of equivalence of form. If a person has the same qualities as in that spiritual world. This is why until we change our nature, we won't be able to feel the spiritual world. So what is the operation we need to go through, or the remedy, the medicine, the change that we need to go through in order to change our nature? That's why the wisdom of Kabbalah tells us about the spiritual world, and when we are in this world, we don't understand a word of what it's talking about. And if we think we do understand, it's just an illusion. It's a complete illusion. We don't understand. So, what are we studying for? Only in order to absorb what is called a remedy, which is a unique force that influences us and changes our nature. To the extent that this force will influence us and change our nature, to that extent we will understand what the books of Kabbalah are talking about. And there's no other way. So those who study in order to simply know it in their minds, they become what Kabbalah calls bat. Because a bat feels that it's in light, but it's really in the darkness. Meaning, one may think he knows what's in the books, and he can philosophize about what's written in each and every page, but he doesn't really sense what's behind the words. He doesn't attain it. And the opposite are those who actually change, transform their nature, and by changing their nature, they attain and are actually found in the spiritual world that is called children of the next world. This is why we should be cautious when we study the wisdom of Kabbalah, so that our study will be in order for us to change our nature, to desire that inner change during the study. The study is in order to bring us a new sensation of the spiritual world, to actually be in it, to feel it, not to just learn from this world, from our life here, about something that is somewhere above the barrier.